On today's episode of Beacon TV, we will be discussing clinical IT adoption. Many factors play into the ultimate success of clinical IT implementation and ultimate use or adoption of the new system. Undoubtedly, the most important aspect is getting our clinicians to use the new system. Today, you'll learn what the most important success factors are for clinical IT adoption. Hello, I'm Ralph Fagnoli, President of Beacon Partners. Today joining me is Kathy Lepar, Vice President of Strategic Clinical Solutions with Beacon Partners. Thanks for joining me today, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Ralph, for having me.
Kathy, let's talk about IT adoption and specifically clinical. What's been your experience out there in the industry with regards to our clients putting this at the top of their priority?
Yes, clinical adoption certainly is something that most of organizations are moving towards if they haven't already. And with that, using strong implementation strategies. However, it's been noted that a lot of the alignment with the physicians are some of the things that they need to, and the clinicians that they need to pay a little more close attention to.
Okay, but in the industry, everyone understands the importance of IT adoption and clinical IT adoption. But what do you think the major factors are of why people are doing this today and it's at the top of the priority list? What are they expecting out of this?
Well, certainly with all of that's come down the pike with ARA and meaningful use, and to be able to pull the outcomes out of this solutions now to actually help with patient safety as well as just better patient care.
Do you think our clients and our people out there in the industry are moving quickly towards clinical IT adoption, or do you still see some stagnation?
Well, certainly there are always going to be people that stay behind a little bit, but certainly with the changes in the meaningful use and the ARA and the dates that are certainly coming very close to us now, people are moving a lot faster.
We expect the meaningful use guidelines to be published in another month or so?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the projects themselves. What do we see are the success factors for IT adoption, clinical IT adoption?
Well, the biggest success is when you actually pull in your stakeholders, pull in your clinicians into the process, because it is their system. This is something that they are going to be working on a day-to-day basis, so they need to be involved from the very beginning.
So let's talk about those buzzwords, if you will, stakeholder and champion. For our audience, let's differentiate the two. What's a stakeholder and what's a champion?
Okay. A stakeholder would be the patients. It could be the physicians as well. It could be the nurses. It certainly is the organization as well. The champions are going to be the physicians or the nurses, the clinicians that will be using the system, but will also be trying to have others involved in the process so that they're getting a system that best works for them.
So let's talk about that champion role, because that seems to be that day-to-day role. What are some of the traits that you think a champion should have that's involved in the day-to-day aspects of a project?
Well, surprisingly enough, a lot of people think that the first trait you would think would be a techie, and that's really not the trait of a clinician champion. What you need is somebody that is a clinical leader and that their peers respect. So you're looking more for somebody that has those quality outcomes that is driving the process.
Okay, so we probably have both seen some of our projects that we've worked with clients. They have those champions, and they're the early adopters. They're the ones that like to play. But should we involve not only the early adopters, but the people that are a little bit, leery of technology? Should we have that balance on our projects?
Oh, definitely. And it's always important to get the naysayers, too, to be involved in the process. Because it's so easy to point the finger after, an implementation is gone and say, this was not a system I picked. So as soon as we can make sure that we get our clinicians involved, it's better for the outcome of that project.
So at what point do we say it's time to bring in the physician champion or the nurse champions into a project? I mean, they have their day-to-day jobs too. So, at what point should we bring them in? But also, what should organizations do to help them be part of a project versus doing their day-to-day job, which some could be teaching, research, seeing patients, and so forth?
Okay. Well, it's important to bring them in as early as possible. So when I say early, even when we're first starting to identify why an organization wants to move forward with clinical adoption. So to identify what that vision is, what it's going to mean to those clinicians and what it's going to mean to their patients, as well as what it's going to mean to the organization. If you're doing a search and selection, make sure you bring those clinicians in there so they're part of purchasing, being part of that process of that system that they're going to be using. Now, if you're already into an implementation and you haven't pulled in your physicians or your nurses, do so now. It's never too late. You may want to set up a contract by actually pulling in clinicians as like clinician consultants and drawing up an agreement with them so that they know how much work effort will be involved in this.
Well, that's a good point. Some of these projects go on for a year, 2 years. How do we keep them engaged, and how do we keep the message out there from the champion and our clinicians out to the rest of the group?
And that's a very important role of the clinician champion, that you'll want to make sure that, that there's that bi-directional information sharing. Because they need to be going back to their peers and letting them know that information. So good, strong communication strategy is going to be important for this role.
Great. Kathy, thanks for joining me today, and I appreciate your commentary. If you'd like to learn more about Beacon Partners Clinical Adoption and Implementation Services, please visit our website.